Good evening, gospel revolutionaries around the world. This is Michael Lilborn Williams coming to you live from the bonus room above my sister's garage. We are glad to have you with us. We just completed a tremendous conference in Calgary, Alberta, and we are ready to share a little bit more with you. I tell you what, we want to encourage you about going and listening to all of the recordings. They are all really quite amazing. All of our speakers, which we had a whole roster of people who, after they heard, at some point in their life, heard me teach the gospel, completely had transformations in their lives. Every one of these men that shared, and we're going to have, I was telling Jeannie when we were on Zoom, our Zoom meeting the other day, I said, you know, we got to stop this misogynistic all men roster here. We've got to have Jeannie in here next year. So I've already threatened her that she's going to be one of our guest speakers. So we're looking forward to that also. And maybe some other of you guys. Hey, we might have some kids sharing. Goodness gracious. The gospel is so simple, the kids can get it. And so we want you to go on either to Facebook or also on YouTube. We have our YouTube channel, or to gospelrevolution.com. And you can find all of these videos. They're all laid out. We got to hear from Don Beresford Bartlett, and we are so glad. Don is back in the hospital again. This is his 6th month of battling COVID and the resulting situations that he's had to deal with from that horrible disease arriving from this virus. And our hearts are with him, and we're waiting to get an update even as we speak. So, but Don was able to do a recording from his bed there, and what tremendous information he gave you. And this is all just from memory. He just, goodness, it sounded like he had been studying right up to the moment before he hit the button. But Don has a tremendous wealth, is our expert in the Greek, and is so very helpful, and a very kind thing that we have in our lives as to have him as a part of the Gospel Revolution and one of our teachers and on staff with us. So yeah, again, we did the virtual conference, and we don't know what we'll be doing in the fall. Some people are saying that possibly things will be getting back to normal, but hey, we know how to do this now, so whatever. One of the things that we've started sharing with you on over these last few months is the pseudographical writings. Writings which we are convinced, and not only us, but many hundreds of years, for many hundreds of years, people have suspected that Paul's writings have been tampered with. And I've heard that, and I've heard it, and I've heard it, and then I started realizing that as I teach, I can only teach so far in most of Paul's letters, and I get to a point where the next chapter just changes incredibly. The word usage changes, the message changes, everything changes. So we've been going through this as to whether or not Paul's teachings were tampered with, or anybody else's, as far as that's concerned. So the thing that has brought this up is that we know that Peter, James, and John disagreed with Paul. Those recordings, that the record of those disagreements are recorded very soundly in Acts 15 and Acts 21. Paul gives his version of what happened in Acts 21 in Galatians chapter 2. At this meeting, and it wasn't just a meeting, they called Paul in. They would not let him stay out on the mission field because they didn't like he was telling people they didn't have to keep the law to have salvation in their lives. And if you want to go back and read those are powerful. But I want to show you, I just don't think it's ever sunk into us the gravity of this disagreement and what that means to the Christian world, the believing world, and those who embrace the gospel. And this is brought out so clearly by Paul. Paul really didn't mince any words, so we've gone over this more than a couple of times. We're going to go over it again because I think we're still missing the acute division that was here between these guys that came right straight out into the public. They were around each other only a couple of times in their entire ministry lives. That they were only they were even around each other. They never held a joint meeting together. They never did any of those things that you might suspect, but instead were actually very far apart from each other in what they said and where they ministered. So I want to read back through this again in Galatians chapter 2 and just take in completely what Paul has to say here in Galatians chapter 2, verse 9. And when James, Cephas, and John, who seemed to be pillars. Now, first off, we want you to start collecting names because Paul's naming names. So I don't want you confused about who all fits in the group that he is speaking to here. And so we've got James, Peter, and John, who seem to be pillars. Now, right up the front, we got a little because the term seemed here, it brings it out in the Greek, it means of their own perception. It's whatever they are, it's their own perception of themselves. These guys are really great in their own eyes. That's literally what Paul is saying here. That Peter, James, and John are really great men in their own eyes. So that's what we're looking at here, is to see that this isn't going well so far. He says, when they perceived that the grace was given unto me, they gave to me and Barnabas. They perceived that the grace was given unto me. They gave to me and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship, that we should go unto the heathen and that they should go unto circumcision. So this agreement was, you go your way and we'll go yours. You go your way, we'll go ours. They never went his way with him, and he never went their way with them. This was an agreement to part company here. This was an agreement to not get in each other's way, because if they had been around each other, it would have been impossible to teach on the same platform with each other. It never happened. And now we've been trying to mend these teachings together, and it will never happen. They don't fit, and thus we get incredible confusion about what the gospel even is. And that's what we're trying to do, is untangle all this mess. It says, only they would that we should remember the poor, the same which I always was forward to do. So Paul's making sure the only thing they told us is just remember poor people. And he said, but we already do all that. So we're not only parting company, the information they gave us and wanted us to do, we already do it anyway. There's so many things. As I'm reading through here, I can think of just a couple of things on every verse that I'd like to stop and share with you, but I'll never get to the point. But when Peter was come to Antioch, I withstood him to the face, because he was to be blamed. Now, Antioch is, as Daniel pointed out to us in the conference, he's referring back most likely to this gathering that they had in Acts chapter 21. This is simply Paul's view of it. The writer of the book of Acts gives his account of it that was told to him. And now Paul is giving his account of this, because like I said, these guys only met on a couple of occasions. You can't get their the meetings that they got together on mixed up. There's just not that many around to get mixed up. He says, I withstood him to the face. Now get the gravity of this. This is Paul, the apostle, who murdered believers, who cast lots. Even he was there when the one disciple was killed, and it says that Paul took his coat off and gave signal that yes, he was in agreement with this assassination, and that he is withstanding Peter, the guy who Jesus invited to walk on water, and he did, the guy who Jesus let down a sheet from heaven and said of all manner of four-footed beasts, and speaking of the Gentiles, not to call unclean what he had called clean. And he says, for before that certain came from James, he did eat with the Gentiles. So James is a culprit here in these verses. That James stopped Peter from doing what Jesus had told him to do. Wow. James had a lot of sway. Now we're going to be teaching you why James had that sway when James just kind of shows up out of nowhere. There's no place that shows a conversion, that he followed Jesus. He wasn't a disciple. None of these things. Just suddenly James shows up, and now we know why. We're going to be bringing that to you. In fact, if you listen to the conference, you'll find out. It's very exciting stuff. It says, he withdrew and separated himself, fearing them which were of the circumcision. And the other Jews dissembled likewise with him. So there was a bunch of believing Jews that followed him. This is the same as the story in the book of Acts. Insomuch that Barnabas also was carried away with their dissimulation. So Barnabas was one of them that followed Paul. And Paul and Barnabas got all caught up in this, we got to keep the law thing. So if you think that what we're going through right now is new, think again, because people much more involved close to the cross were in this debate long ago. And this is the very same debate that we're having to this very day with the Christian community. He said, but when I saw that they walked not uprightly according to the truth. Now, I want you to get the gravity of that. He said, I saw, who did he see? Now, we've gathered names. He said Peter, James, and John, and a bunch of, and these are believing Jews according to the story in Acts. And Barnabas, his own partner, got caught up in this. And he says, but when I saw that they walked not uprightly according to the truth. Now, he says, according to the truth of the gospel, they walked not uprightly according to the truth of the gospel. Peter, James, and John, and they almost got Barnabas, were not walking uprightly according to the truth of the gospel. Well, what were they doing? Was they, sex, drugs, rock and roll? What were they doing? No, they were adding law to grace. And that's what this whole ministry is about, is separating law from grace. That's what Paul's whole ministry was about, was separating law from grace. That's what Christianity, no matter which denomination you go to, I don't care if you're Baptist, Methodist, Catholic, I don't know if you even include Mormon or Jehovah's Witness or any of those, but they're all mixed with legalism. They're all part grace, part law. Every single one. Now they'll tell you it's all by grace. Oh, but if you don't keep the law, that means you're not really one. No, it's not by the law that you get saved, but if you don't keep the law, it means you're not saved. Say it 500 different ways if you want to. It boils down to one thing. You're rejecting the work of the cross if you add law. According to Hebrews, it would be the same as adding a drop of the blood of a goat to the blood of Christ, and thinking that the drop of the blood of a goat from a sacrifice from the old covenant would enhance or make the blood of Christ more effective. You don't believe that, do you? Do you believe that a drop of the blood of a goat would have helped the blood of Jesus? Would it help it out now? Of course it wouldn't. And that's to the same degree that any law kept before, what in the Christianity's mind, before or after your salvation, the law has nothing to do with relationship to God through Christ. None. And how could it be? Because it doesn't even exist anymore. Jesus completely did away with the law, which they go crazy. But it's like, show me where it says that he did away with the law. Well, we can go through Corinthians, we can go through Galatians, we can go through a lot of things. Go through Romans, Hebrews. Which one do you want to go through and see that Jesus actually did away with the law? It does not exist anymore whatsoever. Now, when he said that they walked not uprightly according to the truth, the word not is a very interesting Greek word. It's used many different ways, which means that the translators could have used any one of these. And I want to read you the list. When did Peter, James, and John, what Peter, James, and John, what they were teaching, was it gospel truth? Nay, is one of the words. Well, did they teach it maybe part way? Maybe they got it part right. Maybe they got some of it right. Which one? Maybe the Pentecostals, maybe the Presbyterians. Neither. How many times can you find in the New Testament that Peter, James, and John ever conceived the fullness of the gospel of peace and grace? Never. Did they ever get it? No. Did any of them get it? None. Not and nothing. Those are the words that this little word could have been translated into any of these. So, when you're talking about Peter, James, and John and their relationship to the truth of the gospel, I have some descriptive words for you, right straight out of the Greek. Here are the descriptive words that Paul used to describe Peter, James, and John's relationship to the truth of the gospel. Nay, neither, never, no, none, nothing. And you spell nothing, N-O-T-H-I-N-G. Nothing. Now you can make something out of it, but you'll be making something out of it by people who perceived themselves to be somebody. If you read each one of their letters, they will start out as to why they qualify for preaching the gospel. And all you have to do is just read closely, and they say the reason we're qualified is because we saw him, we ate with him, we handled him, we touched him, we talked with him. And those are all the things that they say is the reason that they are qualified to preach the gospel. As opposed to Paul, maybe, who didn't have an encounter with Jesus until after his resurrection, in which he obviously did not handle or touch Jesus during that time. Just in case you're getting confused when you read the New Testament, when we went through this, I just want to whet your appetite for going back and listening. We've been able to identify a large portion of the pseudographical writings. Let me tell you what is in all of the pseudographical writings, and these are writings that Paul didn't write. And we can show you that he didn't write them. We have proof he didn't write them. We have proof that Peter planned on writing them. Peter planned on adding to Paul's teachings. We have proof that the writers of the New Testament knew this was being done. It states it in the New Testament that people were writing false letters and attaching them. You didn't know that, did you? But we'll show you right there. Let me tell you the doctrines that are not in Paul's teachings that are accredited to Paul. Slaves, obey your masters. Not in Paul's teachings. It's listed in some of Paul's writings, but in the pseudographical area. Wives, obey your husbands in all things. Ladies, you don't do it anyway. You ought to be glad to find out Paul never said that. Obey all governmental authorities. Not just the good ones, but even the froward ones, perverse. That's not Paul's teaching, even though it's recorded in Paul's teachings. It's also recorded in Peter's teachings, by the way. Church authority, pastor, evangelist, teacher. There's only one place in the entire Bible that the word pastors shows up, one time. And it is in what we can clearly show you are the pseudographical writings. You see, how could the same man who said that in Christ Jesus there is neither male nor female, barbarian, Scythian, bond nor free, turn around and tell you how to obey your master and tell you where a woman fits in the whole issue of being in Christ? Sorry. I know it's mind-blowing, but it's time to have our minds blown. Get this garbage out. You know it's not truth. We're just simply going to show you why it's not truth. Keep up, because you're going to have to hang on to follow the gospel revolution. We love you guys.